Welcome back to our study this week. We're going through Genesis 41, and today we're looking at 46 through 52. And we're looking at the years of abundance that Joseph, he really prophesied through the dreams of Pharaoh. And so God gave the dreams to Pharaoh, gave Joseph the meaning of the dreams, and then Joseph explained the dreams to the people. And then he was made second in command of all the nation. So he's been on a wild ride here, obviously. And just as God had said, the land of Egypt experienced 7 years of abundance. Now, it's normal to have years where the crops do well and years where the crops fail. There are a lot of different factors for this. I mean, if you're living along the Nile, there's rainfall, there's rainfall in a different part of, not even in Egypt, it has to be in other parts, because if the Nile floods and overflows its banks and spills the rich soil to farming, then you're going to have abundance. If it doesn't do that, then you're in trouble. And so really in Egypt, the reliance upon the Nile is huge. And so having good years, bad years, that's typical. But the 7 years of abundance that are mentioned here are really just super abundant. I mean, Joseph takes all the extra food and stores it in all the cities of Egypt. The amount that Joseph collects is said to be like the sand of the sea. At first he was measuring it, how much he was bringing in. They were keeping track, keeping tabs of how much they were bringing in, because they were supposed to bring in a fifth of all that was out there. That was what was declared, was to take the fifth. But the fifth was huge. It was, just a massive amount of grain. So the amount of grain was so much in excess that he stopped counting it. They stopped measuring it because they couldn't. It was so much. And God had really, truly blessed the land. And, they had created enough really for what lay ahead. Because remember, the 7 years of famine are coming. And so God blessed the land so much that, the 7 years of famine would be compensated by the 7 years of abundance. It's kind of interesting. You see that later on when you get to Moses, since Moses is writing this would help obviously to remind the Israelites in the wilderness with the manna idea, right? Because they would always have enough, and then on the day that they didn't have any, on the Sabbath day when the manna didn't fall, they would still have enough from the day before. So God provided the abundance before for when they wouldn't have any. And it's the same thing with the year of Jubilee, because they were not supposed to farm on that year, and they would have enough from the year before. And so you see this kind of repetition of this idea too, that God provides the abundance beforehand for when the lean times come. And God doesn't just was throwing them out to die. He provided the abundance beforehand, and even gave them the instructions on what to do. So God had blessed the land, and it was fruitful, very fruitful, extremely fruitful. And then we get to Joseph here. And Joseph was married to Asenath, the daughter of the priest of On. And before the famine hits, they have 2 sons in that time period. Now the firstborn is named Manasseh, because God had made Joseph forget all his hardship and his father's house. Now what Joseph is saying here is that all that he received by the hand of God outweighs the mistreatment of his brothers and whatever gains he would have received from being in his father's house. So Joseph is naming his son after the fact that he believes that he is not missing anything. What God has blessed him with, what God has done in his life, overshadows what has happened in the past. It's not like oh yeah, I forgot that happened. He's saying that the blessing of God has made me forget about the trials and the pain that I had received in the past. And so God has blessed Joseph far beyond what really he could have hoped for. I mean, think about it. He was in prison. He was a slave. So, I mean, if you're dreaming about things, that this is way beyond anything you probably could have thought ever happened for a Hebrew to be second in command. That's pretty interesting. Now his second son is Ephraim, because, as Joseph says, God had made him fruitful in the land of his affliction. So Egypt was not his home, and is the place where he experienced many trials, slavery, false imprisonment. That's where he was afflicted. He was sold into slavery. It was the land of where he was. It was not his home. So it's the land of his affliction, land of his sojourning. But it's the same land where he experienced these trials that God has now made him fruitful. And so God will often do this for his obedient children. In the same place that they face their greatest trials, they will also experience their greatest triumphs. They're also the greatest blessings from God. So sometimes, even in the worst trial you're going through, you experience the greatest blessings. And so that kind of, these stories of Joseph should give us just encouragement and hope that even in the worst times that we have, there's a blessing coming about from it. We may not know what it is. And sometimes we may not even see it until many years later. But there is a blessing coming. God's doing something. And we just have to hold on to hope and our obedience. We shouldn't just give up and curse God. We've got to keep going. So that's our study for today. So come back next time. We'll look at verses 53 through 57. And we'll see how all the earth comes to go to Joseph.